Liam Lawson suffered the worst possible debut in Red Bull, and being part of the team that rarely forgives these types of mistakes, the Kiwi found himself under a lot of pressure right after the first race of the season. After the latest statements from Tsunoda regarding the 2026 Red Bull seat and the fact that he was the highest Red Bull qualified driver, not named Verstappen in Australia, can we see a 2019-like mid-season situation in Red Bull? And if so, would it be a justified move to get rid of Lawson so soon? There is no doubt that the Red Bull voyage has gone all wrong for Lawson, and the race was a clear indicator that the Kiwi has a lot of work to do in order to get accommodated to his car. This is something that both he and the team knew. However, having a couple of drivers crash out in the first couple of races and not being able to utilise it because you were stuck between two Haas drivers is just not acceptable for a team that has a driver fighting for race wins and the championship. The difference in the driving style and the adaptation ability between Verstappen and any other driver on the grid is probably not really worth discussing, but still, Lawson's antics in Australia have reminded us a lot about why Perez was replaced in the first place. Throughout the event, the 22-year-old didn't really make any moves, and when he tried to keep the car on the slicks for a longer period of time in order to benefit from his position, it turned out horribly wrong for him as he spun and hit at the exit of turn 1. Prior to that, in the last combination of corners, Lawson spun but was able to keep the car away from the grass. But to see both of Racing Bull's drivers qualify ahead of him and Tsunoda having a massive race before the carnage unfolds against his favour is something that Red Bull would definitely keep in mind when thinking about their drivers ahead of the upcoming seasons. The sole reason why Lawson was brought to Red Bull was to score a decent number of points and to help them in situations like this, where messy situations can bring a driver up to 10 positions. If we're to look at Antonelli and how his weekend unfolded, we can arguably say that this is precisely the type of performance that Red Bull were expecting from Lawson, who started the race from the pit lane. But it seems like the Kiwi driver will need a lot more time accommodating to the car than usual, and to make matters worse, he was the most experienced rookie from the retired ones. This was the 12th F1 race in his career. When talking about how his race unfolded, Lawson has gone on to say, "We took a chance, hoping at least half the track would stay dry. We hoped at least half the track would be dry, and we knew Sector 3 was bad, but we thought Sector 1 would stay drier, so we carried on. Unfortunately, it was bucketing down with rain. I backed out of pushing at that point because it was so wet. I was just trying to stay on track. We were really struggling, to be honest. I had a lot of tyre issues with the front early in the race. It's just been a tough weekend." Lawson will definitely want to forget his debut with Red Bull. However, this is probably one of the rare tough weekends he can afford with a team, especially after all the pressure that's been mounted on his shoulders due to the choice of promoting him instead of Tsunoda. There is a lot of performance to be found in the RB21, and had Lawson managed to qualify higher, problems of this nature might have been avoided, even though it's hard to confirm this because of his poor performance in the back of the grid under the damp conditions in Melbourne. Truth be told, the RB21 is a very difficult car to drive, and the difference that Max makes is just out of this world, as he would probably make any other driver look silly in that car. But after all, nobody expected Lawson to be fighting Max the way Piastri is fighting Norris. The projected gap was 3 to 4 tenths of a second, not something that Perez was doing in a constant manner throughout the last season to be out of Q3. It's still the first race of the season, and we're going racing again next week, but in a sport like this, it's very important to start the season on the right foot and finish the first race with a strong note because of the self-confidence boost and the positive morale. That didn't happen for Lawson, and now we're headed into the replacement talks much sooner than we would have anticipated. Tsunoda has made a loud and clear statement by qualifying P5 in Australia, and although the Japanese driver failed to score points, he had a very strong race in which he was able to keep Albon and both Ferraris behind him. But on the other hand, when the rain started to pour, he suffered a lot and had to salvage his car to the pit lane, which is why he dropped out of the top 10. It was a nightmare race for him as well, so this might be a good argument for Lawson when it comes to how the drivers navigated their way through the tricky conditions in Melbourne. But we are not talking about the chaos that unravelled in the middle of the race only. We are talking about the competitiveness of the drivers and their ability to keep their position, or in Lawson's case, the ability to gain positions on less superior drivers. That would determine who will be Verstappen's teammate in the foreseeable future. Yuki has shared his feelings feelings loud and clear. I am here to stay, and even without Honda's support, he is aiming at Red Bull's seat from 2026 onwards. When talking about this to a greater extent, he said, I still want that Red Bull seat at some point, but the decision they made, it's up to them, not me. I had like 3 calls from Helmut, Christian and Laurent before the announcement. The first one was from Helmut, so I had the final decision from them. There is no point in complaining. I just said, yeah, I get it. Like, okay, good luck. Pretty much that's it. I just got to keep doing what I'm doing and my mindset won't change. But what is an even bigger bombshell from Tsunoda is the reason why he thinks the Kiwi driver was promoted over him. He doesn't believe performance had anything to do with it. The Japanese driver had an opinion that could trigger a lot of questions in the foreseeable future. The decision they've brought is from a pure political nature. Elaborating further on this, he said, I don't really ask why Lawson got that seat over me. I think Christian mentioned it's not about performance. From what I heard from other people, they're saying that it's not performance related. It's more like a political decision. I don't know. Maybe Christian didn't really say specifically what the reason was. I didn't care really. Whatever they say, I don't know if that is true or not, to be honest. And in the end, I just told them how I feel, how I am still motivated for next season, and that's it. And however you look at this, Lawson is in the bad news bracket because he wasn't able to keep the car on the track when it mattered the most, and it cost his team in terms of repair money. On the other hand, we have 2 very young drivers in Racing Bulls, and Hadjar's season has gone off to a poor start as well. Even though he was the highest qualified rookie in Australia at P11, he couldn't even make it past turn 2 as he crashed on the formation lap. This is something that Stroll has bashed about heavily last year in Brazil, but considering the fact that it happened to Sainz in Australia as well on a much more unusual part of the track, the young Frenchman might get away with the critics of Red Bull. There might not be a lot of time for Lawson to prove himself in the following period, because if we're to look at how 2019 ended up for Gasly, the turning point was the Hungarian GP when the Frenchman was lapped by Verstappen, his teammate. Now, Lawson has been lapped by the leading drivers as well, including his teammate, which is by far the worst way to start your season with Red Bull. Others from the F1 world have also raised their worries as to how Red Bull picks their drivers, Zak Brown included. Even though he was always looking for something negative to talk about the Austrian team, this time it might actually make a lot of sense. And when talking about it, the McLaren boss said, I think it's going to be a very exciting year. Yuki did a great job. He is probably the guy that should be in the Red Bull seat if you look at how he's performed, but they seem to make some strange choices. With all this in mind, what do you think about Lawson's future in Red Bull, and more importantly, do you think that Tsunoda deserved that seat a lot more than the Kiwi driver? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, make sure to check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now.